To find light in darkness and joy in suffering, hold fear within acceptance, and reveal truth through the shadows unveiling. The path to spiritual awakening is not an escape, but an embrace of the totality of existence. Intense connection with the divine requires intense connection with your base. Have you ever felt a disconnect between your spiritual aspirations and the demands of your daily life? Do ancient paths truly meet the modern world, filled with its stresses, its technologies, and its ceaseless stimulation? Perhaps enlightenment isn't some far-off goal, but something that can be integrated into every action, transforming the mundane into the sublime. Throughout history, humans have sought spiritual awakening, yet the integration of these profound experiences into daily life has often remained a challenge. Centuries ago, seekers turned to meditation, yoga, and shamanic practices not as mere exercises, but as maps into the depths of their own being, each offering a path to reconcile the human and the divine. These ancient traditions evolved to address fundamental human questions about meaning, purpose, and suffering, even employing plant teachers to facilitate ego death and rebirth, experiences now often interpreted through a psychological lens. It was Carl Jung, plumbing the depths of the unconscious, who revealed the power of archetypes, and it is these very patterns that underlie and drive the spiritual journey. At our core, humans crave meaning, connection, and purpose, and this fuels and gives meaning to the spiritual experience. In today's society, we can so often feel disconnected from those values. Awakenings can often be disorienting, and it's easy to find one's self lost or even disillusioned when trying to merge spiritual experiences with their regular experience. Given these challenges to accessing our authentic selves, how can we learn to discern the whispers of the unconscious from the noise of the external world? This video will explore the archetypal patterns that drive spiritual awakenings, to reveal how those patterns help the individual to unlock self-awareness and wholeness. To truly grasp the meaning of spiritual awakening, it is key to consult both the ancient and modern understandings of the brain and spirit. We will explore those archetypes, the seeker, the guide, and the shadow, to dive deep into the individual awakening experience and reveal helpful strategies to weave spirituality into the everyday. Here, you won't just get intellectual stimulation, but actionable items for your own journey and shadow work, so you can cultivate self-awareness to live a life of wholeness. Let's dive in so we can uncover the power in vulnerability to build to a life of transformation. It is valid to feel overwhelmed by the road to enlightenment, so by uncovering those underlying principles, you can travel the path to wholeness. Who is this seeker, this figure so prominent in our myths, religions, and even our own lives? Are they simply driven by a noble thirst for spiritual truth, or are they perhaps propelled by a more primal force, a deep-seated dissatisfaction, a yearning to fill a void that gnaws at the edges of their being? It is tempting to paint the seeker as a purely aspirational figure, one driven by an unadulterated longing for the divine. However, to do so would be to ignore the complex and often painful realities that often underlie this archetype. The seeker archetype, while embodying the yearning for meaning, purpose, and connection inherent in the human experience, is often born from a place of profound personal pain, trauma, or loss. Like the hero embarking on their journey, the seeker is prompted by a wound, a catalyst that sets them on their quest. This wound may not always be physical. It can be emotional, psychological, or even spiritual, manifesting as a deep sense of lack or incompleteness that drives the seeker's relentless pursuit of wholeness. But what happens when this wound remains unacknowledged, festering beneath the surface of the spiritual quest? Could it lead the seeker down paths of unhealthy or even destructive behaviors, a desperate attempt to self-medicate the pain that they dare not confront directly? The seeker's primary motivations are multifaceted: to find meaning in a world that often feels absurd and chaotic, to alleviate the suffering that permeates human existence, to connect with something larger than themselves, a source of ultimate truth, love, or belonging, and perhaps most fundamentally, to heal their primal wound. This quest is not merely a search for external solutions or enlightenment. It is also a deeply personal and internal journey of self-discovery, requiring the seeker to confront their deepest fears, beliefs, and limitations. What sets the seeker apart is their courage and willingness to venture into the unknown, to question the status quo, and to challenge the very foundations of their own understanding. They are the pioneers of the inner world, the explorers of consciousness, driven by an insatiable curiosity and an unwavering commitment to truth. The seeker archetype, however, has deep roots in the human psyche, far beyond the purely spiritual realm, so it is essential to explore its psychological and developmental origins. Is it possible that the seeker is, at a subconscious level, attempting to compensate for early childhood experiences of abandonment, neglect, or abuse, seeking to fill the void left by unmet needs and broken attachments? Perhaps the spiritual quest is, in part, an attempt to rewrite the past, to create a new narrative of wholeness and belonging in place of the original story of pain and loss. This brings us to the critical intersection of psychology and spirituality, where the wounds of the past can either fuel or derail the journey toward enlightenment. Connecting the seeker archetype to Jung's concept of individuation sheds light on the seeker's profound desire for wholeness and self-realization. Individuation, as Jung defined it, is the process of becoming a complete and integrated individual, embracing all aspects of the self, both conscious and unconscious. In this context, the seeker's journey can be understood as a process of integrating the shadow self, the dark, and repressed aspects of the personality, and reclaiming disowned parts of the psyche. By confronting and integrating their shadow, the seeker moves closer to wholeness, transforming destructive patterns into sources of strength and wisdom. The seeker's quest for meaning, then, is often a search for the self, the unifying center of the psyche that brings coherence and purpose to the individual's life. But what happens when the seeker mistakes the ego for the self, clinging to a false sense of identity and hindering the individuation process? A particularly compelling manifestation of the seeker archetype is the wounded healer, a figure who has undergone their own share of intense trials and tribulations, navigating the treacherous landscapes of pain and suffering. It is through these experiences that the wounded healer learns to mend their own wounds, developing a profound empathy and understanding that inadvertently teaches them how to mend the wounds of others. What distinguishes the wounded healer is their capacity to transform their own suffering into a source of healing for others, drawing upon their personal experience to offer guidance, support, and compassion to those who are struggling. However, might this hyper-empathy, born from a deep-seated desire to prevent others from experiencing the pain they once endured, lead to burnout or a blurring of boundaries, ultimately hindering the healing process for both the healer and the healed? Examining the seeker archetype through the lens of comparative mythology reveals its universality and timeless appeal. From the heroes of ancient Greece to the shamans of indigenous cultures, the seeker appears in various forms, embodying common themes and motifs. Figures like Odysseus, with their relentless pursuit of home, or shamans who brave the underworld in search of knowledge and healing, all embody the seeker's relentless drive for transformation. But how does the seeker differ from related archetypes, such as the wanderer, who seeks experience for its own sake, or the innocent, who seeks safety and purity above all else? Understanding these distinctions can help us to better understand the nuances of the seeker archetype and its unique role in the human psyche. Despite its positive aspects, the seeker archetype is not without its potential pitfalls. One of the most common dangers is spiritual bypassing, where the seeker uses spiritual concepts and practices to avoid confronting painful emotions or unresolved psychological issues. This can manifest as a tendency to suppress anger, deny grief, or avoid conflict, all in the name of spiritual growth. Another potential pitfall is addiction to spiritual experiences, where the seeker becomes fixated on achieving altered states of consciousness, neglecting the integration of spiritual insights into daily life. But perhaps one of the most insidious dangers is the development of a superiority complex, where the seeker believes that they have attained a higher level of understanding or enlightenment than others, cutting themselves off from genuine connection and empathy. Could the seeker become so enamored with their own spiritual journey that they lose sight of the common humanity that binds us all? Indeed, the seeker can sometimes become lost in endless seeking, perpetually chasing the next spiritual high or the next guru, never finding true fulfillment or integration. This can lead to a state of spiritual materialism, where the seeker becomes attached to spiritual status or achievements, measuring their worth by their level of enlightenment or their collection of spiritual experiences. Ultimately, the seeker must learn to balance their quest for transcendence with a grounded and embodied presence in the here and now, recognizing that true spiritual growth is not about escaping reality, but about embracing it fully with all its joys and sorrows. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, offers a classic example of the seeker archetype in action. Born a prince, shielded from the harsh realities of the world, Siddhartha experienced a profound awakening upon encountering suffering, disease, and death. This initial dissatisfaction with the impermanence and suffering of existence set him on a quest for liberation, leading him to renounce his privileged life and embrace a path of self-discovery and spiritual practice. What is particularly striking about Siddhartha's journey is his willingness to confront his own fears and limitations, enduring years of intense meditation and self-discipline in his pursuit of enlightenment. In this case, the Buddha's initial wound of witnessing suffering became his greatest strength, fueling his compassion and inspiring him to dedicate his life to helping others alleviate their own suffering. Frodo Baggins, the unlikely hero of The Lord of the Rings, also embodies the seeker archetype. Tasked with carrying the One Ring to Mordor and destroying it, Frodo embarks on a perilous journey that tests his courage, resilience, and moral integrity. His small size and perceived ordinariness make him an unlikely hero, yet it is precisely these qualities that allow him to resist the ring's seductive power and ultimately succeed in his mission. What makes Frodo such a compelling seeker is his unwavering commitment to doing what is right, even in the face of overwhelming darkness and despair. Frodo's journey takes him through both darkness and light, forcing him to make difficult choices and confront the shadow within himself, as well as the shadow that threatens to engulf the world. Consider, too, the story of a modern spiritual seeker, a composite of different experiences drawn from contemporary life, who we can call Sarah. Sarah, a successful professional in her late 30s, found herself feeling increasingly empty and unfulfilled despite her outward achievements. A series of personal setbacks, including the loss of a loved one and a career disappointment, triggered a profound spiritual crisis, prompting her to question the meaning of her life and her place in the world. Driven by a deep longing for connection and purpose, Sarah began exploring various spiritual traditions, experimenting with meditation, yoga, and mindfulness practices. She faced numerous challenges along the way, including skepticism from friends and family, moments of doubt and despair, and the difficulty of integrating her spiritual insights into the demands of her daily life. But with perseverance and the support of a therapist and spiritual mentor, Sarah gradually began to integrate her spiritual experiences into her daily life, finding a new sense of meaning, purpose, and connection. Jung writes, in Psychology and Religion, the religious function is an innate and natural one, and it is one of the fundamental expressions of the human spirit. Furthermore, research has consistently demonstrated the benefits of spiritual practices, such as meditation and mindfulness, for psychological well-being, reducing stress, anxiety, and depression, and promoting a greater sense of inner peace and resilience. Studies on the prevalence of spiritual experiences have shown that a significant percentage of individuals report having had transformative encounters that have profoundly impacted their lives, leading to increased meaning, purpose, and connection. But returning to an earlier question, can the benefits of spiritual practice be quantified and measured in purely scientific terms? Or does the essence of spirituality lie beyond the realm of empirical observation? In essence, the seeker archetype embodies the human yearning for meaning, purpose, and connection, a quest that is often driven by a deep-seated sense of dissatisfaction or woundedness. Understanding the seeker archetype allows us to navigate the spiritual journey with greater self-awareness and psychological well-being, recognizing both the potential benefits and potential pitfalls along the way. It is also important to re-emphasize that the wound often becomes the defining feature of a healer's journey, transforming personal pain into a source of empathy and compassion for others. However, the seeker's journey is often not traveled alone. Who are the figures that step in to offer assistance and direction, providing guidance, support, and wisdom along the way? These figures embody another crucial archetype in the spiritual awakening process, the guide. The guide can take many forms, from mentors and teachers to therapists and spiritual leaders, or even the quiet voice of intuition within. But what qualities define a true guide, and how can the seeker discern genuine wisdom from misleading advice or harmful influence? It is crucial to remember that not all guides are created equal, and seekers need to develop their critical thinking skills and cultivate their intuition to identify trustworthy sources of guidance. Have you encountered the guide in your life? And if so, what lessons have you learned from them? Who steps forward to guide the seeker on this arduous path, offering wisdom, support, and direction when the way forward seems shrouded in darkness? Enter the guide, an archetype as ancient and enduring as the seeker themselves, a figure that emerges to illuminate the path, though not always with benevolent intentions. This archetype manifests in myriad forms, from trusted mentors and wise elders to spiritual leaders, and even the quiet voice of intuition within. But seekers must be wary. Not all guides are created equal, and some may lead the seeker astray. The guide archetype is often an external representation of the seeker's own inner wisdom, a projection of their higher self onto another individual. But the critical task for the seeker lies in discerning the authentic voice of their higher self from the siren call of projected ideals. The true guide serves as a catalyst, prompting the seeker to tap into their own innate knowledge and inner resources, empowering them to navigate the labyrinthine passages of their journey with greater confidence and clarity. However, seekers should be wary of placing too much authority on external figures. How can the seeker ensure that the guide they choose is truly aligned with their highest aspirations and not simply a reflection of their own unexamined needs or desires? The spectrum of guides is vast and varied, encompassing a diverse range of figures and influences. A mentor might offer practical advice and share their accumulated wisdom, drawing upon years of experience in a particular field. A therapist might provide a safe and supportive space for the seeker to explore their inner world, unraveling the tangled threads of past traumas and emotional wounds. A spiritual leader might offer guidance on matters of faith and meaning, helping the seeker connect with something larger than themselves. But equally important is the inner guide, the intuitive voice that whispers from within, offering subtle nudges and insights that can often be more valuable than any external counsel. Are you perhaps overlooking the wisdom of your own intuition in favor of external authorities? However, the path of the seeker is fraught with peril, and not all guides are benevolent. The false guide, or shadow guide, lurks in the shadows, offering deceptive promises and manipulating the seeker for their own selfish gain. These figures may appear charismatic and knowledgeable, but their true intentions are often masked by a veneer of altruism. They may exploit the seeker's vulnerabilities, preying on their insecurities and fears, leading them down paths of delusion and destruction. The shadow guide is not necessarily malicious. They may simply be driven by their own unexamined needs and desires, projecting their own shadow onto the seeker and using them to fulfill their own unconscious agenda. How can the seeker distinguish the authentic voice of wisdom from the seductive whispers of the shadow guide? A key aspect of the seeker's journey, therefore, lies in learning to discern between true and false guides, developing critical thinking skills, and cultivating trust in one's own intuition. This requires a willingness to question authority, to challenge conventional wisdom, and to embrace uncertainty. The seeker must learn to evaluate the advice and guidance they receive, weighing it against their own inner compass and personal experience. This process of discernment is not always easy, as it requires the seeker to confront their own biases, blind spots, and vulnerabilities. But it is an essential step in becoming a truly autonomous and self-reliant individual. What qualities, then, characterize a true guide, one who can be trusted to offer genuine support and wisdom on the spiritual journey? A true guide embodies wisdom, not just in terms of intellectual knowledge, but also in terms of lived experience and emotional intelligence. They possess a deep understanding of the human condition, and they are able to offer insights that are both practical and profound. A true guide is also compassionate, approaching the seeker with empathy and understanding, recognizing their struggles and offering encouragement along the way. They demonstrate integrity, remaining true to their own values and principles, and acting in a way that is consistent with their words. And crucially, a true guide is authentic, presenting themselves honestly and transparently, without pretense or hidden agendas. Can you think of a guide in your own life who embodies these qualities, and how have they impacted your journey? Ultimately, a true guide empowers the seeker to find their own answers rather than imposing their own beliefs or agendas. They understand that the seeker's journey is unique and personal, and they respect the seeker's autonomy and freedom of choice. They offer honest feedback, even when it's difficult to hear, challenging the seeker to confront their limitations and embrace their full potential. However, they do so with kindness and respect, recognizing that growth often involves discomfort and vulnerability. The goal of a true guide is not to create a disciple or follower, but to help the seeker become a self-realized and fully functioning individual. Connecting the guide archetype to Jung's concept of individuation reveals the guide's crucial role in helping the seeker integrate their shadow self and achieve wholeness. The guide acts as a catalyst for self-discovery, challenging the seeker to confront their limitations, fears, and unconscious patterns. They provide a mirror, reflecting back to the seeker aspects of themselves that they may not be able to see on their own. This process can be painful and challenging, as it requires the seeker to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. But it is also transformative, as it allows the seeker to reclaim disowned parts of their psyche and integrate them into their conscious awareness. The guide, therefore, helps the seeker to develop a stronger sense of self and navigate the complexities of their inner world, moving closer to wholeness and self-realization. But what happens when the seeker projects their own shadow onto the guide, idealizing them or demonizing them based on their own unconscious needs? This brings us to the psychological phenomenon of transference, where the seeker projects their own unconscious needs and desires onto the guide, potentially leading to unhealthy dependence or idealization. Transference can cloud the seeker's judgment and make them vulnerable to manipulation by a false guide. The seeker may begin to see the guide as a parental figure, a romantic partner, or even a deity, projecting onto them their own unmet needs for love, validation, or security. This can lead to a blurring of boundaries, where the seeker loses sight of their own autonomy and becomes overly dependent on the guide's approval. It is therefore essential for the seeker to maintain healthy boundaries and differentiate their own feelings from those projected onto the guide, recognizing that the guide is simply a human being with their own limitations and imperfections. What steps can the seeker take to avoid falling into the trap of transference and maintain a healthy relationship with their guide? Different traditions of guidance offer various approaches and perspectives on the seeker's journey. Mentorship, for example, often focuses on practical skills and knowledge, providing the seeker with the tools they need to succeed in a particular field. Spiritual direction, on the other hand, emphasizes the exploration of inner experiences and the cultivation of a deeper connection with the divine. Therapy focuses on healing emotional wounds and resolving psychological conflicts, while coaching focuses on setting goals and achieving peak performance. While each tradition has its own unique strengths and limitations, they all share a common goal: to help the seeker grow and evolve into their fullest potential. How can the seeker integrate these different traditions of guidance into a holistic approach to self-discovery and transformation? Obi-Wan Kenobi, the wise Jedi Master from Star Wars, serves as a classic example of the guide archetype in fiction. Obi-Wan emerges to mentor and train Luke Skywalker, guiding him on his journey to becoming a Jedi Knight. His wisdom, self-sacrifice, and ability to guide Luke on his journey to becoming a Jedi Knight are the foundation upon which Luke builds his new self. Obi-Wan embodies the qualities of a true guide: wisdom, compassion, and a genuine desire to help Luke grow and evolve. He provides Luke with the knowledge and skills he needs to face the challenges ahead, but he also empowers him to make his own choices and find his own path. Even Obi-Wan's death serves as a catalyst for Luke's growth and independence, forcing him to rely on his own inner resources and embrace his destiny. But could Obi-Wan's influence, however well-intentioned, have inadvertently limited Luke's potential, preventing him from fully embracing his own unique path as a Jedi? Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher, offers a compelling historical example of the guide archetype, known for his method of questioning and his unwavering commitment to helping individuals discover their own truth. Socrates wandered the streets of Athens, engaging in dialogues with citizens from all walks of life, challenging their assumptions and prompting them to examine their own beliefs. His emphasis on self-knowledge and his willingness to challenge conventional wisdom made him a controversial figure, but his teachings inspired generations of thinkers and continue to resonate today. But was Socrates truly a selfless guide, or was he driven by his own ego and a desire to prove his intellectual superiority? Consider, too, the case of a therapist guiding a client through a process of self-discovery and healing, a composite of experiences anonymized to protect the privacy of those involved. The therapist provides a safe and supportive space for the client to explore their emotions, confront their past traumas, and develop healthier coping mechanisms. The therapist's ability to provide support, empathy, and guidance while empowering the client to take ownership of their own journey is central to the therapeutic process. The ethical considerations and boundaries that are essential in the therapeutic relationship ensure that the client's needs are prioritized and that the therapist does not exploit their vulnerability. The therapist must remain objective and avoid imposing their own values or beliefs onto the client, instead helping the client to identify their own goals and values and to develop a plan for achieving them. Unfortunately, there are many examples of malevolent guides throughout history, cult leaders, or corrupt gurus who used people's need for guidance against them. These individuals often possess a charismatic personality and a gift for manipulation, preying on the vulnerabilities of their followers and exploiting their desire for meaning and belonging. They may use mind control techniques such as isolation, sleep deprivation, and repetitive chanting to break down their followers' resistance and indoctrinate them with their own twisted ideologies. The wound of the follower, the deep-seated sense of emptiness or lack, makes them particularly susceptible to being taken advantage of by these charismatic figures. But how can individuals protect themselves from the allure of these dangerous guides and maintain their own autonomy and critical thinking skills? Jung writes in Psychology and Alchemy, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Furthermore, Research on the psychology of guidance, mentorship, and transference has shown that supportive relationships can have a profound impact on individuals' well-being and personal growth. Studies have consistently demonstrated the benefits of seeking guidance from qualified professionals, such as therapists and coaches, in terms of reducing stress, improving coping skills, and achieving personal and professional goals. However, it is important to note that not all guidance is beneficial, and that seekers must be discerning in their choice of mentors and advisors. In essence, the guide archetype embodies the figures who offer assistance and direction on the seeker's journey, providing wisdom, support, and knowledge along the way. It is also essential to re-emphasize that discerning the qualities of a true guide are critical if you are to avoid potentially malevolent figures who may try to take advantage of you. Now, having explored the characteristics, qualities, and potential pitfalls of the guide archetype, we must consider the darker aspects of this seemingly helpful dynamic. What happens when the seeker projects their own shadow onto the guide, or when the guide's shadow influences their interactions with the seeker? What dark elements exist in this seemingly harmonious journey? As we transition to the topic of shadow work, it is important to emphasize the importance of integrating the shadow self as a way to avoid projection and maintain healthy boundaries in relationships with guides and mentors. Perhaps by confronting one's own shadow, seekers can become more discerning and less vulnerable to manipulation by false guides. Consider how you can cultivate your own inner guidance and develop greater self-reliance. What dark elements may exist in your seemingly helpful and harmonious relationships? How can we ensure that the guides we choose are truly serving our highest good and supporting our journey toward wholeness? The guides have offered their wisdom, but what if the greatest teacher lies not outside, but within, in the very aspects of ourselves we most fear and reject? The shadow isn't the enemy, but the key to wholeness, a reservoir of untapped potential, a part of us that contains aspects that must be understood rather than suppressed. Is it possible that the path to spiritual awakening requires us to venture into the darkness and confront the disowned parts of our psyche? Ignoring or suppressing the shadow comes at a steep price. Repressed shadow elements manifest in undesirable behaviors, projections, and psychological distress. We often see in others the very traits we deny in ourselves. This is psychological projection, a primary mechanism by which we disown and attribute our shadow qualities to others. We judge them harshly for what we secretly fear we might be ourselves. This inner conflict, this war within, drains our energy and distorts our perception of reality. What behaviors do you find unacceptable in others, and might those be the very things you are running from in yourself? Take a moment to consider the aspects of yourself that you find most difficult to accept or acknowledge. What qualities do you judge most harshly in yourself and others? What traits in others trigger strong emotional reactions, be it anger, disgust, or contempt? These intense reactions often point to disowned shadow qualities, aspects of ourselves that we have banished to the unconscious. Can you identify those qualities, and how might they be influencing your life? Jung defined the shadow as the unconscious aspect of the personality that encompasses repressed or disowned traits, desires, and impulses. It's the repository of everything we deem unacceptable about ourselves, both individually and collectively. However, it is critical to distinguish between the personal shadow, formed from individual experiences and traumas, and the collective shadow, containing universal, instinctual patterns of behavior that are common to all humanity. Are you able to distinguish between your own personal shadow and that of the collective? But the shadow is not exclusively negative, it has a dual nature. While it contains repressed negative traits, it also holds positive qualities, such as unrealized potentials, creativity, healthy instincts, and assertiveness. Repressed positive traits can become distorted or destructive when left unacknowledged, turning into arrogance or other destructive behaviors. How often do we criticize ourselves for not being assertive enough, not realizing that this very assertiveness is buried deep within our shadow? waiting to be unleashed. The ego, striving to maintain a positive self-image, often represses aspects of the shadow. This repression creates tension and conflict within the psyche, leading to psychological imbalances and a distorted sense of self. The ego and shadow are in a constant dance of push and pull. Is this dance a battle in your own life, or a gentle sway? Integration is not about eliminating the shadow, but understanding it and allowing it to work in harmony with the conscious mind. It's about acknowledging our darker impulses, accepting our imperfections, and reclaiming the hidden potential within. This integration leads to greater self-acceptance, empathy, and heightened creativity. It is through understanding the shadow that we can see the whole. What is keeping you from accepting your shadow? Robert Louis Stevenson's novella, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, offers a powerful metaphor for the struggle between the ego and the doctor. Dr. Jekyll's attempt to suppress his dark side leads to the Mr. On of Mr. Hyde, who embodies his repressed impulses and eventually spirals out of control, wreaking havoc on Victorian London. The tale warns us of the dangers of denying one's shadow and the importance of acknowledging and integrating it. But can a person truly control the shadow once unleashed, or will it always lead to destruction? The common mythological motif of the hero confronting a dragon or monster is a symbolic representation of shadow integration. The dragon represents the hero's own repressed fears, desires, and destructive tendencies. Defeating the dragon requires the hero to confront and integrate these aspects of themselves, leading to greater self-awareness and wholeness, to psychological strength and understanding. This is why in so many heroic myths, the dragon sits on a hoard of gold, which represents all the powers that will be unlocked upon its defeat. In your own life, what dragon are you avoiding, and what treasure might it be guarding? Scapegoating, the act of blaming an individual or group for the problems of society, serves as a stark manifestation of the collective shadow. Societies often project their own disowned qualities onto minority groups or marginalized individuals, blaming them for societal problems and justifying discrimination or violence. Consider the persecution of Jews in Nazi Germany. The Nazis projected their own shadow qualities, their feelings of inadequacy, their resentment, and their destructive impulses onto the Jewish population, demonizing them and ultimately leading to genocide. What societal scapegoats exist today, and what shadow qualities are being projected onto them? Consider the case of a 40-year-old woman, a successful executive, who came to therapy struggling with feelings of anxiety and self-doubt. Through journaling, dream analysis, and guided visualization, she began to explore her shadow, confronting aspects of herself that she had long suppressed, including her anger, her ambition, and her sexuality. This process was challenging, but she found that as she integrated these disowned aspects of herself, she became more confident, more creative, and more fulfilled. She was able to set healthy boundaries, express her needs assertively, and embrace her full potential, no longer burdened by the weight of her repressed shadow. What specific techniques might resonate with you, and what small steps can you take towards integrating your own shadow? To summarize, the shadow archetype is a powerful force in the human psyche, representing the disowned and repressed aspects of ourselves. It is not exclusively negative, but also contains hidden potential and unrealized qualities. By acknowledging, understanding, and integrating the shadow, we can move towards greater wholeness, self-acceptance, and spiritual awakening. This brings us to the archetypes of the anima and animus and their relationship to the shadow. How do these archetypes influence our relationships and our understanding of the opposite sex? And how can integrating them help us on the path to wholeness? How does our relationship with our own shadow influence our relationships with others? And how can recognizing this help us in our journey? What would your relationships look like if your shadow was integrated? Reflect on your own experiences with the shadow and consider how you can begin to engage in shadow work. What specific aspects of your own shadow are you ready to explore, And what small steps can you commit to taking towards integration? By embracing our shadows, can we find our light? The anima and animus are not just abstract concepts, but living forces within us that shape our desires, fears, and interactions with the world. These inner figures, representing the totality of the unconscious feminine in men and the masculine in women, serve as bridges to the unconscious, unlocking sources of creativity, intuition, and profound emotional depth. But what happens when these powerful forces are ignored, misunderstood, or projected onto others? The anima and animus represent the totality of the unconscious feminine in men and masculine in women aspects of the psyche. They are not merely collections of traits, but dynamic, personified complexes with their own needs, desires, and agendas. The anima in a man embodies emotionality, receptivity, intuition, and a connection to nature. The animus in a woman embodies assertiveness, logic, rationality, ambition, and independence. These qualities, when integrated consciously, enrich the personality and allow for more balanced and fulfilling relationships. But when repressed or projected, they can lead to distorted perceptions and unhealthy patterns, and a person will not be whole. These archetypes are closely linked to the shadow, both serving as repositories for repressed qualities and sources of projection. Just as the shadow contains the disowned aspects of our personality, the anima and animus can hold the disowned aspects of our gender identity. A man who rejects his feminine side may project his anima onto women, idealizing them or, conversely, devaluing them for not meeting his unrealistic expectations. Similarly, a woman who rejects her masculine side may project her animus onto men, seeking a strong, assertive partner to complete her, or, conversely, criticizing them for being domineering or insensitive. This leads to a vicious cycle of projection and disappointment, hindering the development of authentic connections. A wounded anima animus often leads to wounded relationships. Ignoring this link is a dangerous game. The anima and animus exert a powerful influence on our attraction to certain qualities in potential partners, often leading us to project our own unacknowledged traits onto them. We may be drawn to someone who embodies the very qualities we lack or suppress in ourselves, hoping to find wholeness through the relationship. But this projection creates unrealistic expectations, leading to disappointment when the partner inevitably fails to live up to our idealized image. Projecting is not seeing. We are merely seeing a reflection of what we wish we were. In Jungian psychology, the anima is defined as the unconscious feminine side of a man's personality, while the animus is the unconscious masculine side of a woman's personality. Jung viewed these archetypes as essential for psychological wholeness, believing that integrating them allows individuals to access a wider range of human experience and develop more balanced personalities. Are we doomed to seek our missing halves in others, or can we cultivate wholeness within ourselves? The qualities associated with the anima encompass emotionality, receptivity, intuition, creativity, and a deep connection to nature. When a man consciously embraces these qualities, he can cultivate greater emotional intelligence, express himself artistically, and develop a deeper appreciation for beauty. However, if the anima remains unconscious or repressed, it can manifest negatively, leading to moodiness, excessive sensitivity, and vulnerability to emotional manipulation. A wounded anima will look to be saved, but will not allow themselves to heal. A man with a wounded anima may fall to the nice guy syndrome to try to make up for it. Conversely, the qualities associated with the animus include assertiveness, logic, rationality, ambition, and independence. When a woman consciously embraces these qualities, she can cultivate greater confidence, develop leadership skills, and exercise independent thought. However, if the animus remains unconscious or repressed, it can manifest negatively, leading to dogmatism, aggression, and a tendency to dominate or control others. A wounded animus will look to dominate and control, trying to prove that they don't need help, but secretly be screaming out for assistance. A woman with a wounded animus can be a Karen and be quick to anger. The integration of the anima and animus is central to Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming a whole and integrated person. This integration requires consciously acknowledging and embracing the qualities of the opposite sex within oneself, rather than projecting them onto others. By integrating these archetypes, individuals can achieve greater self-acceptance, improve their relationships, and develop a more balanced and harmonious personality. How can we begin to recognize and integrate these often unconscious forces within ourselves? The dangers of projecting the anima and animus onto others are manifold. Projection prevents us from seeing others as they truly are, hindering our ability to form authentic connections. It can lead to unrealistic expectations, codependency, and relationship conflict. Recognizing and withdrawing these projections is essential for developing healthy relationships and achieving individuation. Is it possible to truly know another person when our perceptions are clouded by our own projections? The myth of Eros and Psyche offers a powerful symbolic representation of the journey to integrate the anima and animus. Psyche's arduous journey to win back Eros represents the challenges of integrating the feminine principle and overcoming unconscious fears and insecurities. Her trials symbolize the necessary steps of self-discovery and the confrontation with one's own shadow. Their eventual union symbolizes the achievement of psychological wholeness and a harmonious relationship, a testament to the power of perseverance and self-awareness. But what if Psyche had given up on her quest? In Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, the relationship between Eli Mr. Bennet and Mr. Darcy provides a compelling example of how individuals can overcome initial projections and develop a deeper understanding of one another. Elizabeth initially projects her Mr. assumptions about Mr. Darcy onto him, judging high MRS arrogant and aloof. Similarly, Mr. Darcy initially judges Elizabeth based on her social status, viewing her as beneath him. However, as they interact and challenge their own prejudices, they develop a more nuanced and accurate perception of each other, leading to a fulfilling and transformative relationship. Can we learn to see beyond our initial judgments and embrace the complexities of others? Consider the case of a couple in relationship counseling who were struggling with persistent conflict and dissatisfaction. Through therapy, they began to explore their anima and animus projections, recognizing how they were projecting their own unacknowledged needs and desires onto each other. The therapist helped them identify these projections, understand the underlying needs they were trying to fulfill, and develop healthier communication patterns. As they learned to take responsibility for their own inner worlds, they developed greater empathy, increased intimacy, and a more fulfilling relationship. What would it be like to recognize that we are the problem in our relationships and not the other person? In the real world, a failure to integrate the anima animus can lead to rigid gender role reinforcement, where men feel pressured to suppress their feminine qualities and women feel confined to traditional domestic roles. Men might feel that they cannot show emotions without appearing weak, while women might believe that their worth lies solely in their ability to nurture and care for others. These limiting beliefs stifle individual expression and prevent individuals from fully realizing their potential. What is stopping people from exploring what they love and are passionate about? In summary, the anima and animus archetypes play a crucial role in our relationships and personal growth. Acknowledging, understanding, and integrating these archetypes is essential for achieving psychological wholeness and forming healthy connections with others. By embracing our inner feminine and masculine qualities, we can move towards a more balanced and fulfilling life. This brings us to the concept of synchronicity as a signpost on the spiritual path, a manifestation of the interconnectedness of all things. Are there forces outside of our understanding, and can we harness those forces to better our lives? How can we recognize and interpret synchronicities in our lives, and what guidance can they offer us on our spiritual journey? By integrating our anima and animus, we can open ourselves to more authentic relationships and a deeper connection with our own inner selves. But with synchronicity, we can see that the universe is guiding us. Reflect on your own relationships and consider how the anima and animus archetypes may be influencing your interactions. Identify specific projections you may be making onto others and commit to taking steps towards withdrawing those projections. In conclusion, after this exploration into the depths of the human psyche and the heights of spiritual aspiration, we can begin to see the intricate tapestry that weaves together ancient wisdom and modern understanding. The journey has been complex, interweaving psychological frameworks with mythological narratives, spiritual practices with personal experiences. But this complexity mirrors the very nature of spiritual awakening and psychological integration. We've encountered the seeker's relentless yearning for truth, the guide's illuminating influence, the shadow's hidden power, and the anima-animus relational mirror, each archetypal figure reflecting facets of our inner world. Our central argument has been that spiritual awakening is not about escaping the self, but about integrating all aspects of the self, the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, the conscious and the unconscious. It is about the alchemical marriage of opposing forces, the reconciliation of the inner and outer landscapes. We have stressed the importance of self-awareness, psychological well-being, and practical groundedness in navigating this sacred journey. This is the only path of true north. Remember the initial question posed in the introduction. How can we use the wisdom of ancient traditions and the insights of modern psychology to navigate the spiritual journey with greater self-awareness, psychological well-being, and practical groundedness? This exploration of the archetypes has provided a framework for answering this question, but the true answer remains a lifelong journey, a continuous unfolding of potential. Our understanding of spiritual awakening has hopefully evolved from a distant goal to a continuous process of self-discovery and integration. Spiritual awakening is the journey, not the destination. Consider this final, thought-provoking insight. The path to spiritual awakening is not about transcending the ego, but about befriending it. It is through acknowledging our limitations and imperfections that we come to realize our true potential for wholeness and transformation. Embrace the paradox of human existence, the simultaneous experience of suffering and joy, darkness and light, limitation and boundlessness. Recognizing this paradox can lead to greater acceptance, compassion, and resilience in the face of life's challenges. Understanding that our connection with spirituality goes hand in hand with our connection with reality, that base and divine are intertwined. One simply cannot happen without the other. Continue to explore these concepts in your own lives through practices like journaling, dream analysis, meditation, or therapy. The journey of self-discovery is a lifelong endeavor, and the insights gained here are merely seeds planted for future growth. Reflect on the archetypes that resonate most strongly with you and identify specific shadow qualities you are ready to explore. In future videos, we hope to explore further archetypes or specific practices, leaving the door open for continued engagement. Thank you for watching.